Alessia, I'm nervous. How do we intro this?
I don't know.
Hi, welcome back to the Wraparound.
Just use this as the intro. Just
This is it. This is it. Maryuri isn't here this week because she's a working lady with some funky hours. But yeah, none of us know what we're doing. Maryuri does the brunt of it every week. But she's left us some very nice notes in our show outline that she made. And so we're going to try and follow it to the best of our abilities and hope to do Maryuri proud.
Yeah, Marjorie usually keeps us on track, so we'll see how good we are this week with doing that.
On the bright side, we do have a time limit. That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Because otherwise this could go on for like hours.
For sure.
Segue into segment.
The Wraparound with Grace, Alessia, and Maryuri.
See, we usually kind of like hate on Maryuri when she comes up with segues, but honestly, she does a great job considering we're like trying to find one right now.
We have no clue how to do it. You know who else is trying to find things? 4 NHL teams are trying to find a spot in the Stanley Cup final.
There we go. We found one.
We did it. Yeah, so it's the conference finals. That's lots of fun. And it's Vegas and Montreal and Tampa and the Islanders, and they are just living their best lives. These have been some really great series so far, and both of them are tied 2-2 at the moment. So we're waiting on some game 5s. We're recording this at like 7 p.m. Right before the Islanders and Lightning game 5. Really great timing on our part, always is. So by the time this is out, you'll know what's happening. We'll know what's happening, but not us right now. Future us.
But yeah, I guess we'll start off really hot. And we'll go with Vegas and Montreal because the group chat's been lighting up for that series. And me and Grace have been talking up a storm between whether it's Fleury or Price. We're always talking about those two. But like Grace said, the series is tied 2-2. And I definitely see this going 6 or 7 games. I don't know about you, Grace.
Absolutely. It's been a tough fought series so far. And each team has had some really great, both offensive and defensive moments where your eyes are just like glued to the TV. You're like, oh God, what's this team going to do? Yeah. So yeah, I can definitely agree with you there. It'll be a long fought series.
Yeah, and the last 2 games were kind of interesting in the sense that game 3, Vegas just dominated, and then they ended up losing in overtime. And then game 4, Montreal dominated, and then they lost in overtime. So I think like coming from what I've been seeing, Montreal is having a very good series. Aside from last game, I feel like we kind of sat back in the third period and in overtime the last game. And something that we'll bring up is that following 2 straight losses and a big mistake, Vegas decided to sit Fleury and start Leonard. So when you're looking at this decision, it's like a very big turning point for Vegas, which worked in their favor. But for me, no matter what, I know Fleury made a mistake. That happens. But Fleury is the better goalie. I think no matter what the situation is, you gotta go with the better goalie. No disrespect to Robin Leonard because he is a great goalie, but this is a very tight series. So I mean, at least it worked in Vegas's favor. But we saw what Grace thought about Leonard starting.
Yeah, I got mad at Robin Leonard a few games ago, and that was unfair. But the goalie situation in Vegas is always so funny because for the past 4 years, it's just felt like a revolving door the whole time. You know, but you always have Fleury. So it just feels like the safe option all the time because he's always been there. And so from that, I say start Fleury. Everybody knows, giant Marc-Andre Fleury fan. I love the guy. But maybe it's time to go with the unsafe choice for the rest of this series. Because I feel like Montreal is getting really smart with how they're playing Fleury as a goalie. You know what I mean? So, you know, maybe give Leonard the start the next game, and then if things do go a little bit rough, put Fleury back in. But I feel like a little bit of inconsistency for Montreal is probably the best way to beat them.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that, what you thought about it. Would you start Leonard next game or would you start Fleury? And Fleury's a great goalie. Just one thing that I've noticed is that when you're comparing him to Carey Price, especially in the first game, I thought Fleury wasn't as calm in net or kind of composed. That's just something I saw. He had a great game, don't get me wrong, but just comparing him to Price. And I thought that was kind of like maybe first game jitters or something. I know he's an experienced goalie, but I saw that continue into the other games. So that's just one thing I noticed. But one thing I wanted to bring up, and I told Grace about this before we even started recording, last night especially, I mean, besides what the players have done, the referees have been embarrassing. I'll just say that. I think I'll straight up come and say this, and I'm not just bringing this up because it affects Montreal. It's been affecting both teams. It's been affecting the Islanders versus Tampa Bay series, and it's affected, quite frankly, most of the series this playoffs. And I think in this series, the Canadiens are suffering more from it, but the Knights just as much, maybe just a bit less. There have been a ton of missed calls, and last night's game was just out of control. I don't know, a lot of people were talking about it, even people who weren't Vegas fans and Canadiens fans were talking about it. So one thing was Nick Suzuki gets sucker punched in the face right in front of Chris Lee. He's looking right at it, and then he turns away and pretends like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
That was not called. And, obviously I see things for both teams. So if you're a Knights fan, you're mad at Edmonton's cross-check that went unnoticed. In Game 3, Corey Perry gets a high stick. There is blood all over his face and not even a minor penalty. So I'm not even speaking towards the Habs and Vegas series. I'm saying as a whole, the league really needs to figure out what's going on with officiating, because this is the Stanley Cup semifinals. One call and it makes a complete difference in a game.
Yes.
So I'm saying right now, at this point, you should have the best refereeing possible. And quite frankly, it's been even worse than I've seen in the regular season.
That's the thing. It's just like it's gotten exponentially worse over these playoffs.
Yeah.
You saw it in the first round, you saw it in the second round, and now it's just come to a peak where it's just like blatant people who've never watched hockey before could be making these calls better than the refs could.
Exactly.
And it's just, it's not right for any team ever. And it needs, it's a problem, and it does need to be fixed. But I'm happy you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, and the way I was going to ask you is I was literally just going to be like, so Alessia, how do you feel about Chris Lee today?
Don't feel great. And the thing is like, I'm not harping on this because the Habs lost last night, because I don't think last night's loss was mainly because of the refs. Portion of it was because of the Habs obviously sitting back. But like at some point, somebody needs to say something. And it's kind of sad that when coaches and GMs or, people in higher power on teams speak out in terms of the NHL's officiating, they say something and they get like a $25,000 fine. Meanwhile, a violent hit gets $5,000. That player gets suspended, or doesn't even get suspended, sorry, and they get a fine that's basically like pocket change.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I know. It's so inconsistent, and it can be so infuriating. And I think that everybody feels that. You see a Twitter timeline after these games, and it's just like rage coming from all directions.
Yeah. And usually, like when you go on Twitter and there's like a bad call, you see it mainly just from the two teams. So there was a lot of, Habs fans, a lot of Knights fans who were complaining about the refereeing last night. But I mean, when you go on Twitter, everybody, no matter who they cheer for, was looking at this game and saying, what is going on? So that speaks volumes. And if you're watching the Sportsnet coverage as well, the whole panel was kind of like in shock, like, what is going on? So that already says a lot. But we'll go to the positives from this series. Maryuri, in her outline, she told us to kind of pick some standout players that we thought were kind of sticking out to us. So for the Habs, I'll say Nick Suzuki. He's grown so much the past year, and if he's not scoring, he's setting up guys like Cole Caulfield and Paul Byron, like we saw last night, with great scoring chances. And the standout player for Vegas for me is Alex Pietrangelo. I don't know how many goals he's scored already on us. He's been contributing immensely to Vegas's offense. So that's
Yes,
what I'll say about that.
absolutely. I kind of think you nailed it on the head because honestly, those were my players too.
We always have the same people, and you got to give credits to the goalies too. Fleury and Price. Price has just been a wall. We know that.
Price is incredible.
We've said
Price
that
is
so
so
many
fun.
times.
It's so
Yeah.
fun to watch Price just be a goalie, like to
Yeah.
just exist as a goalie. We do need to move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York
Yes.
Islanders. That series is also tied 2-2. As I mentioned, game 5 is tonight. This has been kind of a wacky duck series. It's been a little bit interesting. But what do you think these teams need to do? And I will read exactly what Marjorie wrote so I don't mess this up. What do these teams need to do in order to break out of these close scores and solidify a win with a lead greater than a goal? And who do you think will be the first to crack? You go first.
So I'm looking at last game that was played, and first period, no goals were scored, but in the second period, the Islanders came out strong and they were able to create a 3-0 lead. Now, they've had leads before in games, and then slowly Tampa Bay kind of picks it up and tries to make a comeback. And in the playoffs, when you're down, even if you're down 3-0, who else? What other team is better to make a comeback? It's obviously Tampa. They're a really strong team. So when I'm looking at the Islanders, they need to stop sitting back when they have a lead. 3-0 lead is huge going into the third period. And Tampa Bay, they tried to come back. And they almost did, because Ryan Pollock, if he didn't block that shot in the dying like moments of the third period, that could have gone to overtime.
Yeah.
So Islanders are a very strong team. They just need to play a consistent 60 minutes. And they have guys like Matt Barzal and Josh Bailey who've been stepping up and scoring for them. And Tampa Bay has almost the exact same thing, if not better. Guys like Braden Point. And he's currently riding a 7-game goal streak right now. So let's see if he continues that tonight.
Tampa Bay also has like $100 trillion a year team. So
yeah,
no excuse for this.
Yeah, exactly. So, standout players, Matt Barzal, Braden Point, who has 16 points in 15 games played in the playoffs. Like, that's crazy. So this is another tight series, very tight series. But I would say, just one thing I would say is don't underestimate the Islanders.
Exactly. And I think that was definitely something I was thinking about too. And it's that these two teams need to be consistent, and you can take game 4 as a really great example for this, because the first period showed that they were evenly matched, and then the Lightning fell off in the second period and the Islanders were able to boost that up to their advantage. And then the Lightning were almost able to come back. Like they are very evenly matched teams. They just need to get in there and try to win these games. They need to not back down. And game 4, I think, blew everyone's minds because, it was reminiscent of Leafs hockey for the Islanders. They got a lead and then they relaxed and then they almost lost. I think my standout players for this series, I'm going to have to go with Ryan McDonagh for the Lightning, just because of game 4. He had that spin move at the end at such a crucial moment in the game, and you could tell that it was his last ditch effort. And he just lay on the ice afterwards for like a chunk of time because he just couldn't believe that didn't go through. Like, it was a spinning move. Like, you don't see those every game. And you could tell that he really wanted it. And then for the Islanders, Ryan Pollock, because he got a chance to play goalie for a moment there and then saved his team from going to overtime. So I think that those are my two players, my two key players.
Yeah, that was probably like a huge save, and he's not even a goalie.
Exactly. And if that had been a goal, it would have been a highlight reel goal, but now it's just a highlight reel defensive move.
Exactly. I think one thing just to mention between both series, I mean, sometimes Tampa, obviously they have big forwards. They have their star lineup, and so does Vegas. I think one thing a lot of when you see after the game, they always say, oh, this line is struggling, like a very talented line, like Vegas's first line, oh, they're struggling. But you also have to take into consideration the other team's great defensive play. So a lot of times when I'm watching like Vegas and Montreal and their first line, like the Pacioretty line for Vegas, like doesn't really show up. Everybody's like, they're not performing. But for me, I'm looking at the defensive play of the Danault line, who's been shutting down the teams that we've played their top lines this entire playoffs. So that's just something to keep in mind, even for both series. It's not like sometimes you'll say like, oh, these big players, like let's just say Tampa Bay's top line isn't what people expected it to be. Don't just put it on Tampa being like, oh, they're struggling, because Islanders is a very good defensive team as well. So just one thing I've been thinking about.
And Marjorie posed the question in the outline that we should pick who we think is going to win. I made the executive decision to not do that because we believe the jinx is back.
Yeah.
During some precautionary testing last round and this round, we kind of believe the jinx is back. So we're not going to say anything.
We're not saying anything.
But we have a very nice question. As you all know, Marjorie loves to ask us a question at the end of each episode. And this week's question is, who will have a mental breakdown if their team loses? Grace or Alessia?
I think I've said this a lot. I'm just happy to see the Habs go this far this year, because I'm telling you right now, if you saw the text messages I sent to both Grace and Marjorie after Game 4 of the Habs vs. Leafs series, I'm like, I lost hope. I am losing hope. Good luck in round 2.
You were on like a whole different plane of existence. You were so angry.
And then after that, Grace and Marjorie were like, oh, what are you thinking now? Like, what's going on? And then here we are. And I'm just happy to be here. That's basically it, honestly.
I think that even just from the listeners who know me from listening to these episodes, it is very obvious that I will be the one to have a mental breakdown if my team loses in any way, shape, or form. I think that just comes with my personality. But I was going to say, I was thinking about this when I saw the question before we started recording. And I was like, it'll be me, duh. And then I was like, but wait, this just happy to be here attitude from Alessia could manifest into something much more if the Habs lose. And I was like, I kind of don't know if I want to see that.
I think you just need something to keep you happy because you had to see the Leafs lose to the Habs in round 1.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do after this. If Vegas is out, I have never cheered for the Lightning in my life. I have never cheered for the Islanders in my life.
Yeah.
I have never cheered for the Habs in my life. So usually I have like one team that I've like kind of cheered for before end up in the finals or close to it.
Yeah.
That is not the case this year. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see where we all end up.
Yeah, like for me, I was like, okay, once the Habs are out, I'm assuming Colorado will still be in the race, but no. Like I said last episode, if you tell me before these playoffs, oh, by the way, Montreal's making it further than Colorado, I think you'd be like, I'd be laughing. Like, no, there's no way. There's really no way. But I don't know. Here we are.
Here we are.
It's bizarre.
But
I'm not complaining. Not complaining.
No negative energy, only good vibes.
Good vibes only.